a new study is showing a link between medication prescribed for ADHD and psychosis. The study was published by the New England Journal of Medicine. The percentages are very low, but it showed patients who are prescribed amphetamines like Adderall had a slightly higher risk of developing psychosis compared to those who receive other types of ADHD medication like Ritalin.
Dr. Lauren Moran is assistant professor at Harvard Medical School and a psychiatrist at McLean Hospital. She's also the lead author of that study. So let's talk about this, doctor. Just sort of walk us through the basics of the study. What did it conclude?
So we basically looked at new users, people who are being prescribed these medications for the first time. And we compared amphetamines, those which is like Adderall or Vyvanse, to people who were prescribed methylphenidate, which is like Ritalin or Concerta. And we found that the Adderall-type drugs had an increased risk of psychosis.
So explain. Sorry, doctor, go ahead.
No, go ahead. That's okay.
So I think there's a little bit of a delay. So what is psychosis and why are the findings here concerning?
Psychosis is hallucinations when people might hear voices that other people don't hear, and delusions where people have kind of false beliefs. They might think, for example, like the government's following them or that they're in danger, someone's out to get them, or they might, on the other hand, think that they have special powers or think that they're God. And often when people develop psychosis, they don't have insight, so they don't even realize that they're impaired. They think these things are really happening. It's very scary. And for our study, we only counted people who developed psychosis and had a visit with a doctor, either inpatient or outpatient, and needed to be prescribed an antipsychotic medication.
So listen, I know that there are going to be a lot of parents that are going to be hearing this or seeing a headline and not reading the whole thing, and they're going to start to get really concerned. Maybe their child is recently diagnosed or has been diagnosed for a while, has been on these drugs for a while. What do you say to those parents?
I think one of the things that's really important about the study is that we only looked at new users, and it seemed that the risk of this happening happens early on in treatment. Most of the psychotic episodes happened in the first several months of treatment. So I think if you have a child who's taking Adderall or Vyvanse and they've been taking it as prescribed and they're benefiting from its treatment, there's no reason to take them off. This is really something that people should be considering when they're first starting. One of the things that we noticed with the prescribing trends is that for unclear reasons to me, the use of amphetamines has gone up dramatically, especially in this age group, which was 13 to 25-year-olds. And so it seems that doctors are choosing to start people on Adderall, even though existing guidelines kind of suggest that both stimulants have similar effectiveness. So I think there needs to be a dialogue between patients and doctors about why they're choosing Adderall over the Ritalin-type drugs. And I think it's probably more of a concern if you have other risk factors for psychosis, for example, a family history of bipolar or a psychotic disorder. I might shy away from Adderall in patients with that kind of history.
So, doctor, one of the things that I think is really interesting for a lot of people is, according to the Center for Disease Control, ADHD has been diagnosed at an increasing rate over the last 20 years. Now, if you talk to my grandparents, they'll say, there is no such thing as ADHD. It's just a kid's not able to concentrate. All he needs is, go get me my bell.
Right.
And I'll show you how to concentrate. And there are others who say, look, this has always existed. It's just that it wasn't diagnosed, 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Right. And if you actually go back in history, you can find very old examples of kids with ADHD. I think it is a real disease. I think it can be it can really impair people's lives, and these medications can have dramatic effects that can be very helpful. I do think that there is sort of a trend, especially in older people now, to kind of, or adolescents, to use them for other reasons than ADHD. Or, for example, I actually work at McLean Hospital, and I work on an inpatient unit for patients with psychotic disorders, which is why I started to do this research, because we were seeing a lot of college students coming in who were being prescribed Adderall with developing psychosis when they had no other psychiatric history. And so some people really do have ADHD, but then a lot of other students would tell me that they just were using it to get an edge. There's this perception that so many people in college are using Adderall that if you don't use it, you're kind of at a disadvantage, because people are using it to cram for tests, to stay up all night and study. and it does improve concentration. Even if you don't have ADHD, if anyone takes a stimulant, they will actually be able to focus better, regardless of whether or not you have ADHD.
So your study, doctor, focused on people who have been diagnosed with ADHD, though, not the people who are using it because they want to pass their tests.
We didn't study people who are getting it from their peers. We studied people who actually had a diagnosis and were prescribed the medication.
So, doctor, I have another question for you, and I guess this is important for parents who are considering what to do with their children should they come across a situation like this. I was doing a story in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and I was profiling a little boy who had taken up crocheting. He was only about 10 years old, and he's become like this crochet phenomena. And he was showing his 5th grade class how to crochet, and one of the kids asked him if the crocheting helped him to focus. This was a little 5th grader asking another 5th grader if the crocheting helped him to focus. And what that little boy didn't know is up until he had taken up crocheting, he was considered one of the bad kids in school. And I asked the class if other kids had problems focusing, and they all raised their hands, and they started giving me examples of what they did to calm themselves down. One kid said they like to draw. Another kid said they like to play music. And I wonder if there are ways in this over-medicated society that we live in with children that may have ADHD, to focus their attentions by giving them some kind of I don't want to use the word hobby, but something that they do that will allow them to focus their mental energies as opposed to giving them medication.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great idea. And medications are not the only option. There is behavioral therapy. I know that I've personally worked with people in the past who have thought they had ADHD, but they really just had bad time management skills. And so we kind of worked on how to manage your time better, and the person didn't really need to go on medication. So I think there's a lot of other strategies. There's behavioral therapy, but if you feel that the symptoms are severe enough that someone needs medication, there's a range of options. There's non-stimulants and the stimulants, which is the subject of this study.
Perfect. Dr. Moran, thank you so much.
Sure.